I know.
All right, welcome back. I hope everybody got a little bit of coffee, got to stretch your legs. All right, for the second half of our day, it's a real honor to have with us discussions of two incredibly important Auburn University programs that have motivated and inspired our work here at the museum in different ways. Both programs are schools in their own right, and were interesting case studies for us in thinking, how do we create spaces where we make things? But both schools are also focused in different ways on the creation of creative and radical objects that redefine how we think about teaching and making across campus. So it's first my great pleasure to have with us our colleague Kai Stevens, who's the founder and director of the Alabama Prison Arts and Education Project, who'll be in conversation with my colleague Randy Evans, who's the manager of public practice and community partnerships here at the museum, and has also been a teacher with Kai's program in the past. Thank you both for being here today.
Thank you, everyone. See, Andrew's really wanting to clap. We need an applause sign. So as Chris stated, my name is Randy Evans, and I'm the manager of public practice and community partnerships here at the museum. And I'm really pleased to be in conversation with Kai Stevens today. I started my position here a little over 2 years ago, and before I came to do my campus visit, I was living in the Bay Area, and I was kind of researching Auburn University and trying to figure out what was Auburn University beyond football. And I came across a Gee's Bend exhibition that was at the museum here, and writing that Kai's did about the Gee's Bend exhibition. And then I kind of was like, who is this person? This is curious. And so I kind of dug and learned about Alabama Prison Arts and Education Project, and knowing that Auburn was a place where this type of work can happen. I'm not saying that's not difficult, really helped motivate me to want to be here at Auburn. And also I was very, as Chris mentioned, lucky enough to be able to teach a couple semesters in the program as well. So I'm just thrilled to have this opportunity. So what I wanted to kind of start with, though, is mentioning to Kai is that Alabama Prison Arts has been around for a little more than 20 years. And 20 years is both a long and short time. A long time where many of us might have just take for granted that it's always been there, but also short enough that it's been a large part of your career and a defining part of your work. So I was wondering if you could share more about the impetus for the program, how it intersected with your life as an artist and a native Alabamian, and that history.
That's a very large question. First, just want to say thank you for having me here. I really do relish every opportunity to talk about our work and what the people that we work with are doing inside of creative and, intellectually fueled spaces inside of prisons. How many of you had no idea this program existed? Excellent. Thank you for being here. I'm from here. My family has been from this area for generations. Somebody from my family has either been working or teaching at Auburn University for close to 125 years. So I'm of this place. And growing up in the great state of Alabama, being me, was not easy. And I wanted to get out of here as soon as humanly possible. I did end up going to undergrad at Auburn, and then I went to graduate school in New York at Sarah Lawrence, where I did an MA in women's history and an MFA in poetry. Moving from Waverly, Alabama to Sarah Lawrence was a big jump, but it was an incredibly influential experience in my life. One, I completed 2 degrees, master's degrees there, and I had no clue what my grades were until a year and a half after I had completed both of those degrees, because they don't give you your grades. Because it is not about a grade. It is about learning. It is about fostering curiosity. It is about possibility. It is about how to open your eyes wide to the world and being surrounded by people who can help you find and hone your tools. So coming from here, going there was a big jump for me in terms of how I thought about learning and how I thought about classroom spaces and how I thought about, as somebody from a privileged and remarkably nerdy background for a very long time, how it was never a question in my life of if I could engage in any kind of academic, cultural, or artistic engagement. My grandfather started the pre-med program here. My grandmother was an artist. She was working, almost got her PhD. My other grandmother had a master's degree. I spent my life immersed in books and art. And I did not know how unusual that was until I got to New York, because everybody in New York thought I was going to be a dumb redneck. Legitimately, people would ask me if I had plumbing in my house. And I also moved back from New York to Waverly, Alabama, and lived next to one of my favorite couples and families in town who did not have running water in their house in 2001. Legitimate question. All of that influences this work. I believe that artistic and educational spaces should be open to anyone at any time, and that someone's geography, someone's economics, gender, skin color, anything should never prevent someone from engaging their head and their heart and building community. But we are surrounded by structures and cultures that reinforce that on a daily basis. In fact, I would argue that that is the history of higher education. If you are a woman, you identify as a woman in this room, or you are a person of color, higher education was never meant for us. We still put up gates. So I moved back to Alabama with two remarkably useful degrees, an MFA in poetry and an MA in women's history, and I moved back to my town of, at the time, 180 people with more student debt than I can possibly relate to you. It was fun. So I'm doing all kinds of odd jobs. And a friend calls me one day, fateful phone call, and says, would you like a fellowship from the National Endowment for the Arts? And I did legitimately use a 4-letter word in my response to her because I thought that she was messing with me. And she said, no, really, it's teaching poetry. And I was like, yes. And she said, well, there's one thing for you to consider. It's at the Talladega Federal Prison. No problem. Then she proceeded to tell me that I was the last person that they could think of to ask because no one else would do it. Which is kind of horrible. But fateful phone call. So I stepped into the Talladega Federal Prison and I fell in love with the classroom and the dynamics there. And that is a deeply complicated statement to make because prisons are horrible. They destroy people, they fix nothing. But what I found was the only place outside of Sarah Lawrence where people wanted to learn and create for the sake of learning and creating. That it wasn't about a degree, it wasn't about a publication, it wasn't about some other external acknowledgement. It was about who they were as a human being. So that's what started all of this. So what started as me teaching at Talladega has now grown to one of the longest running programs in the country. We have, at this point, served over 6,000 people inside, offered hundreds and hundreds of classes. We publish a book of their work every 2 years. We have a traveling art exhibit. We built the first ever Bachelor of Science degree program inside the Alabama Department of Corrections from Auburn University. We have a reentry center in Birmingham. All of this started because of a poem. And I want that to resonate for a minute because we forget the essential nature of creating to being alive. And we spend so much time trying to define it. What is it? What is successful? What is good? What is all of that? Who cares if it's good? Like, for real. Our aesthetic is not going to be the same. But you can go into a prison in Alabama and talk with somebody who's taken a poetry class from us, or an art class from us, or a physics class from us, or a philosophy class from us, and they will tell you that those classroom spaces saved their life. And so all of a sudden, it's not just about a poem or a drawing, it's about a human being's life. And we forget that. And maybe when we are thinking about making and teaching and interacting with students, especially inside of academic structures, we shouldn't forget that so much. That disconnect is damaging us in all kinds of ways. It is not easy to do this work here. I know Randy is going to ask me this other question in a minute, but I'm just going to say this, and then I'm going to shut up for 2 seconds. You don't need a qualifier for why a human being deserves to learn. Just like you don't need a qualifier for why a human being deserves to eat.
Thank you. Something that Michelle and Moira left us with was thinking about kind of the inflexibility of institutions and how they're structured around gatekeeping or classifying, segregating in another way. And part of the work that you've done with your program is almost like creating a school within a school, except it's not a school housed within a school, it's a school housed within bureaucracy and higher education and the Department of Corrections and all these other stakeholders who don't want to do the work that you're doing or don't want to support it or wary of supporting it maybe at its most generous. So I'm just wondering, can you talk more about what that work is like? And sometimes I think about it as you're creating a pathway, but once you think the pathway's made, you have to go and remake another pathway, and you're constantly, it's a iterative practice of not taking for granted that this is going to be permanent, but that there's always factors that are going to try to erase it.
That's another very large question. So one of the truths of our program is that it is essential that we exist. And to boil it down to just very simple terminology, people have to have hope. Existing, working with people who are incarcerated, who we as a society have all of these emotional and intellectual reactions to that terminology and preconceived notions about who those people are, makes this work here a challenge. We are not a progressive state in any shape, form, or fashion. We do not quality invest in K through 12 education for children in our state. That's part of the reason you see incarceration rates that you do. That's another discussion. Auburn University is a land-grant institution, and because I grew up in the family that I grew up in, on both sides of great-grandfather who was an extension, and like the education goes to the people. I've read journals and stuff when he used to go out and with the extension service and go out in the field and work with farmers and stuff in like the early 1920s. And he is talking about taking education to the people. I believe that. I believe as a land-grant institution that we are supposed to be able to reach every human being in the state. Lots of people do not agree with me, because reaching every person in the state means every person in the state. And I know people who are incarcerated are complicated. I got it, truly. They are also somebody's mother or father, brother, sister, cousin, grandparent, friend, husband, wife. And the ripple effect of that and the effects of incarceration on our entire state are just utterly toxic. And we know this. The more that somebody engages in art and the more they engage in any kind of educational endeavor, the more it becomes a part of who they are and how they interact with the people around them. So you will see pictures behind me of students teaching students, right? That they are building the world they want. All of our major funding comes from outside of the South. The only reason our program is able to exist and do what we do on the level that we are able to do it is because we have amazing support from the Andrew Mellon Foundation. And we have some individual donors in New York who believe in what we are doing very powerfully. That's the only reason, because you have to have money to run a program. You have to have money to buy supplies. You have to have the National Endowment for the Arts has supported us since 2003, but there are a bazillion arts programs that need support, right? And they can't always give you what you want. The Alabama State Council on the Arts also can't do it. So money and resources drives what we are able to do, which makes it hard, which also makes this time right now particularly unsettling. And it's necessary. So yeah, it's a challenge. It's unpopular. And that makes me sad, but I also have to tell you that if we did a better job of taking care of people in our state in a holistic interpretation there, we wouldn't be having the systems of incarceration that we have, which means there wouldn't be as many victims as there are. And the state of Alabama doesn't really do anything to help people who are victims of crimes.
You kind of referenced it, but we have some images behind us of your program, of the students in action. And you were mentioning you wanted to focus on showing them in process of making. But we know, or we can infer that resources within a prison is very limited, and access not only to learning, but access to materials or supplies are hard to come by, and then just having the ability to focus in those spaces. I just wanted to read this kind of, if you didn't see, Kais has kindly brought several of the anthologies that they have published over the course of the program, and you can take one for free when you go today. It's in the cafe, but you write in your introduction here, you say, "Our students seldom get a desk or flat surface to work on outside of class time. Many of the drawings you see here are drawn on laps with contraband cardboard as the closest semblance to a firm working surface, on the floor, or sitting on a bunk trying to pull together items that can constitute a hard backing. The poems and stories, every draft the student writes is with pen or pencil on paper with borrowed dictionaries." So thinking about the limited resources and how sometimes we can we want to acknowledge those limited resources, but not romanticize them. And I just wondered if you could talk about the creative life in prison and what it means for your students and in those settings and how they access that and in these dehumanizing conditions that you're talking about.
Sure. So one of our approaches to work inside of prisons is very much influenced by, and y'all are gonna, Barry Fleming knows this about me already. I am a pen snob, right? I really am a pen snob, and I like certain kinds of pens, and I get really excited about certain kinds of paper because I'm a writer. And sometimes we tell ourselves that we need this tool and this tool to create. And working inside of prisons has helped really reinforce this for me, but it's really, we want people to step into learning in a place where there is an absolute desert of creative implements and tools that legitimately you just need a broken number 2 pencil and a scrap of paper, and you can make many things. And part of the reason for the somewhat minimalist approach is people who come into, most people who are incarcerated are indigent, right? They do not have money. Art supplies are not sold on the canteen, so they can't just go get stuff. Color pencils are contraband. Most art supplies are contraband. So getting into one of our arts classes is a big deal. Wait, I lost my train of thought, and this happens. Y'all bear with me. What was I saying before that? Menopause, anybody?
That it's a joy or a big privilege for the students to be able to get into your classes.
Right. Thank you. Okay, so here comes Auburn University. Here comes this art class. Here come amazing professors. And we bring in all these supplies. We bring in a drawing kit. We bring in real drawing paper. And when we leave, they don't get more supplies. And in some ways, it's kind of a regression. It's the reminder of, I am in this place and I can't get this thing. So we really try to empower creative problem solving and using tools and things that are around you, and like content of drawing still lives with a crumpled up brown bag from the canteen or multiple rolls of pilfered toilet paper. That is the still life, but that is what is there. And it normalizes being able to see what is around you as an artistic subject matter. That it doesn't have to be a bowl of fruit. We have brought in fruit. You would not believe the memos that I had to write to bring in fruit, but this was why it became complicated. I wasn't going to bring in fruit and have people not be able to eat it. And there is not a lot of fresh fruit inside of prisons. I had a 60-year-old man break down in tears because he had a banana, and it had been probably 40 years since he had had one. That's the Alabama prison system. So everything that we do is complicated. It is intentional, and the weight of it is impressive. And the creativity that happens inside, the community that comes together around learning and creating is extraordinary. And for everybody who signs up to come into one of our classes, there are many, many, many people sitting back on their bunk who are too scared to sign up because they believe they are a failure. because prison tells you that you're a failure. Society tells you that you're a failure. So why would you want to go to a class and be reminded of that? So the people who come to our classes become the teachers. So people who teach with us are teaching in a way that also helps every person in that classroom go back and be able to talk about shading or perspective. And we might make some extra photocopies of handouts to go inside. It's, well, I'm going to hold that thought.
Okay. So thinking about the creative work that happens and being able to share that work also, we've talked about requires a lot of consideration of power, risk, and consent. It got brought up earlier in the earlier presentations about self-determination, who gets to tell their story, who has the right to their story. Can you talk about how you, and then also the stereotypes of what a incarcerated person looks like, who they are, and trying to move past those stereotypes. Can you talk about how you navigate sharing the creative work of the students you work with, and why it's important, and how you think about those things?
So one of the reasons that there are going to be a lot of people in here that didn't know about this program is because we do not use a lot of the traditional tools for publicity. Because tools for publicity with a program like ours basically involve exploitation. People who are incarcerated and the artwork and the crafts that they make, I mean, some of their, the work is stunning, but everybody always wants to put a comma. So-and-so artist, comma, prisoner, prison artist. Oh, they're an artist. So everything, like with we treat people who are submitting creative works, visual or written works, like we would treat somebody out here. You submit it, there is a signed consent. Photographs, there is a consent. And I don't use a lot of photographs. You don't see a lot of interviews with our former students. There's some. I don't ask. And the reason I don't ask is because I know that most of them would do anything for our program. And you think, that's a contradiction. Prison is a trauma. Every time you ask somebody about their incarceration, you are re-traumatizing them, even if we are a bright spot. You are bringing up memories. You can trigger issues where they might need mental health supports, and guess what? We don't really do so well with that in this state either. So we don't ask. Somebody who is out, who has reached out, they have to offer it and ask me to do something a lot before I take them up on it. Because as visible as they are, they become a target because there are people who will pester them. So it's the same with their artwork. There's a lot. Incarcerated people are people, right? People first language. It's the flash in the pan. You do not want to see your work, your creative work, being lump summed into something and being trivialized by one aspect of your life. Nobody that I know as an artist or a writer wants that. So we don't want to do it. It's just, and it's like, it means that we pass up a lot of opportunities, but people inside are exploited. I probably get 2 emails a week from organizations all over the US asking me to ask our students to donate artwork to their program for a fundraiser. There's the New York reaction that is happening inside of my head right now, which I will not articulate. And then there is my reaction that I can communicate to you right now, which is they're indigent. They do not have money. If they sell a piece of artwork for $50, that actually means that they might be able to pay to go to a doctor's visit inside of the DOC. And if you don't have the money, then you can't pay the fee, which means you might not get to see a doctor. So we're asking people, and people are always asking artists and writers to turn over their hard work for nothing. We've always paid our teachers. It is not a windfall of cash, I assure you, but it is important to pay people for their work. We want students to be in control and artists to be in control of what happens with their work. Period. And I delete all of those emails that I get asking for the free donated artwork because I'm tired of writing responses to them. Maybe that's the cynic in me at this point. But I think we have to be respectful and not make assumptions about who the artist is and what their life has been like and trivializing their existence. They're an artist. They're a person.
Thank you. I'd love to open it up to see if there's any questions from people in the audience.
Before we do questions, can I just acknowledge one thing? Barry, can you stand up for 2 seconds? This is Barry Fleming. He's an art professor, a retired art professor from Auburn University, who's a very, very dear friend who I talked into teaching our first ever visual arts class in 2004. And Barry and some of y'all might know Barb Bondi, who taught with us forever and ever and ever, another very dear friend. Those 2 individuals really are profoundly responsible for the vastness of what the art component of our program is and how we've been able to imagine and grow that. So I'm going to give you a public thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much for your comments. I'm Michelle Milne from Montreal, Canada, just passing through. And I'm really thrilled to hear about your program. I'm a family physician and I do a practice that's exclusively a prison practice in Montreal, Quebec. So this is near and dear to my own interests. Are the people that you work with, are there options for them to sell their work?
So selling artwork inside of the Alabama Department of Corrections is complicated. They do. Several artists, in fact, over the history of our program, basically, people will donate art to our program to sell to try to raise money to support other classes. And it might not seem like a lot at this point, but monies raised from selling artwork has paid for 2 classes. And that is a powerful statement by artists and people inside who want to create those opportunities for other people. But yes, people can sell it. It's just not necessarily easy. And we do not have the mechanism to be that agent.
Yeah. I'd just seen a YouTube or something about a system in Australia where there are incarcerated populations that do so much art in prison and they go out often and they can flourish as artists and they have some kind of a bridge between the 2 where they are able to sell their work. It was an interesting, I'm just trying to look for it.
No, it's I appreciate you bringing that up. There are there are so many things that could be, right? But it really, in many ways, does come down to the number of hours in a day and the number of people. And it's always coming back to funding to build a responsible structure to help make those things happen. But there was we do have several people who have left incarceration who are now making their living as an artist. I don't know how many of you know the exhibition Marking Time, which was curated by Nicole Fleetwood. If you saw the big splash cover image in the New York Times several years ago, you saw a charcoal drawing that was produced by someone that I'm very happy to call my friend, who I met in Tutwiler in 2002, and she produced that piece of work inside the Birmingham Women's Center. And that piece of work is now the property of the Museum of Modern Art in New York. Not bad.
Other questions?
Hi. Oh, that's loud. Sorry, I was just wondering, because you mentioned that you gave poetry classes and visual art classes, and we were seeing like pencil drawings and maybe some like paintings in the photos. What are maybe some other kind of classes that you're hoping to implement?
Did you say other mediums for classes? Is that what you, sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, yes. This is a massive mural project that we did at Staten Correctional. And we've done printmaking classes, we've done watercolor, we do all kinds of classes. People are always amazed when I say, yes, we do printmaking, because when you work on lino cuts, you have some pretty sharp implements. We have no problem bringing any of those things into facilities. We take X-Acto knives, scissors, because we have a system that works, and we follow the rules. And a lot of people, in order to exist inside as a program, exist inside the Alabama Department of Corrections, they have to let you in, and it is not a guarantee. And everything about their structure is based on security, and they've got really unbelievable, horrid circumstances and conditions that they have to deal with. It is a deeply, deeply complicated system. And the Department of Corrections trusts our program. They know that we have a template. They know that people are trained. They know that there is something that has worked, and they are so willing to let us try things. So, I know there's one image that's circled through here that's a James Baldwin quote that was produced at St. Clair Correctional, which is northeast of Birmingham. That's a MAX facility, men's facility here in Birmingham, in Alabama. And that was our first printmaking class. It took me 7 years to figure out how to get a printmaking class inside, but I was very determined, because I saw one in San Quentin several years ago, and it was beautiful because people were working together. So that image that you see is a composite image of all that all the men in the class worked on. So they each took a section and put that together. That was their decision. You think about that message coming from a MAX facility where the majority of the people inside of the classroom will never see the outside of a facility as a free person. And that is the message that they are giving us, is extraordinary. It's extraordinary.
All right, I see one question in the front. Andrew?
So other similar, has anybody in the other states tried to follow your initiative? It's not an initiative. So what Andrew is asking are there other programs like this around the country? And there is not a single other program that is exactly like ours, because we invest in we have this powerful community education programming, which are non-credit classes and open enrollment. And we have worked with as many as 12 facilities at once on those classes. Most people who have a higher education in prison program just do the college credit program, and they don't do anything for the rest of the population. But the community ed classes and the art classes are a really important place for people to be able to start, because I can tell you that you have not written a perfect sonnet. I cannot tell you that your poem is wrong. I can't tell you that your drawing is wrong. I could say it might not be in perfect perspective. And again, this kind of falls back to the who cares if it's in perfect perspective, right? Sometimes it is the process and the possibility that is the most important thing. But there are programs. There are not many in the Deep South. We're kind of a beacon of a program to lots of other places. And they basically say, if this can happen in Alabama, it can happen anywhere. And there is probably some truth to that. But there are programs. I am pretty partial to ours.
Thank you. I just wanted to maybe end with one last question, just because we're thinking about Alabama specifically. Just these are some statistics I came across today, that Alabama jails more people per capita than every country in the world except El Salvador, and that we have the 6th highest incarceration rate on the planet. And I know that our parole system is broken. What would you want people to take away from this, or to move forward with this knowledge of, like, how do we help support the work that you're doing, or change the way maybe people think about prisons in Alabama and its value?
Thank you for asking that question. One, please have conversations with your communities and your people. I know it is uncomfortable to talk about systems of incarceration. I know it is uncomfortable to talk about crime. I know we must look at all the systems that are in place that enable an individual to easily make decisions that lead to incarceration. When I first started working at Tutwiler, there was a woman in the poetry class, and I am a little bit of a smarty pants for those of y'all who do not know me yet. And she said, "Do you want to know why I'm here?" And I don't want to know why somebody is incarcerated. It makes no difference to me. I see a human being. And I'm like, "I assume you want to learn to write poetry." And she was like, "No, Miss Kais, do you want to know why I'm here?" And I said, "No, I'm telling you anyway." I was like, "Okay." I repeatedly write bad checks at the grocery store to feed my kids, and I know that I am writing bad checks at the grocery store, so I am prosecuted at a different level because of the intent to deceive. It is not an accident. I had a man in my class at the Frank Lee Center in 2004, and at the end of completing his poetry class, we give everybody a certificate, and he just fell apart. And the young men in the class came up and just kind of circled him and supported him and everything. And the thing that I know about that mountain of a man, who's probably in his mid-50s, was that he was kicked out of his home when he was 9 years old. And people are going to blame him for being in prison because he made bad decisions. That's part of the thing that we have to have conversations about, is like the context and the need for, and that's why I'm so thrilled that you guys are going to get to hear from Andrew shortly. Human beings need a place to live that is safe and warm. They need food. They need their community. They need education. But if you don't have a home, you don't have a place that is safe where you can engage with yourself and your family, like all bets are kind of off because you have to spend every waking hour trying to figure out how to survive. You're not thinking about art, even though you would like to be. So conversations, we are always happy to have supporters, always happy. If you have a group of people you want me to come talk to, let me know. I will. I'm not afraid to answer the hard questions because we have to work on this for Alabama and because people matter, the state matters, our well-being matters. I appreciate y'all.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you both so much. We've reached the last part of our day, and it's my pleasure to introduce, as our final speaker before a group conversation, Andrew Freer. Andrew is the director of Auburn University Rural Studio. Since 2000, he's lived in rural New Bern, Alabama, where he runs the program that questions the conventional education and role of architects. Rural Studio's work has been published extensively, and he lectures around the world, so it's a particular pleasure that he's found time to be with us today. Andrew's designed and built exhibits at London's Victoria and Albert Museum, at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, as well as the Milan Triennale and the Venice Biennale. And I think I just heard that maybe working on a project for Venice this summer. Andrew was a Loeb Fellow at Harvard University, received the President's Medal from the Architectural League of New York, and was elected to the National Academy of Design. In 2022, he received the Cooper Hewitt National Design Award in Architecture on behalf of the studio, and most recently was honored with the Thomas Jefferson Foundation Medal in Architecture. Thank you so much for being with us today, Andrew.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, can you all hear me? I want you to give a really loud round of applause for Kai's, because that work is fucking extraordinary, y'all. And excuse my French, I feel unworthy and humbled to follow what you're doing. Kai's, you were one of, Kai's was actually in the CADC at one period in the time, and a member of our college, and I think she's one of the most remarkable people in this university. So good on you, and thank you for everything that you're doing. So I do feel unworthy. Also, unfortunately, my boss is here, so I've already sworn. So she's like ticking that box. So Dean Dawn Finley, she enables Rural Studio to do what it does. So thank you for all of your support. There's also somebody else in the audience that works for Rural Studio. She does all the hard work. I'm just the pretty face that, you know, stands up in front of people and makes inappropriate jokes. So thank you all for the invite today. It's really an honor to be here. The earlier conversations and the one just now really have me reflecting on what the hell we're doing and why we're doing it. So it feels like a therapy session, quite frankly. And of course, thank you to Chris and Tiffany and Isaac for organizing all of this. Really enjoyed it, and privileged to be here. I've got way too many slides, so you probably just get like a sheep hook and pull me off, or will just tell me when it's done, and I'm going to go real fast. I think this year is our 31st year at Rural Studio. How many people know what the hell Rural Studio do or think they know? I was like, so many of you are going to be bored actually, but so then it's more the need for me to go really quick. I've been at Rural Studio for 25 years, which has gone like that. My parents are still wondering when I'm going to get a proper job. I think in response to the first conversation, I think our work is very much about learning by doing, of course, but also learning through a project, not an object, and it's all a collaboration. For us, I think craft is, it's interesting you hear these conversations and it's like, well, we don't talk about craft because I think for us, it's built in that it's a social responsibility. It's out of respect to ourselves and our neighbours that we want to do it the best we possibly can and turn over every leaf in the book to figure out the best way to do it. And I also think design, for us, I always say to the students, design actually is everything. It's can you believe I designed that I was going to look like this today? I made that decision. I design when I'm going to have lunch. I design when I'm going to go to sleep. You're in charge of all of those decisions. So design is absolutely everywhere. The interesting thing, it's not really thought about as being a rural thing. So, I've really thoroughly enjoyed being immersed in a rural place, and that's why I'll talk about rural at the beginning, because there's such a can-do attitude there. I mean, farmers work with the things that are around them, right? They don't wait around, they get it done. And I think we have, one of the reasons I went to Rural Studio 25 years ago was that sort of get it done, can-do attitude. But we want to do it well. I think even down to deciding whether you're going to, I always ask the students on the entry form for Rural Studio, do you prefer a screw or a nail or a hammer or a drill? How do you decide which is more important? That's craft, that's design. Those are all decisions that you should be making and thinking about. Yeah, so I think that, often the Rural Studio has been, Samuel Mockbee used the term citizen architect. I'm always worried about that a little bit, that just if you go through our program, you're a citizen architect. I think there's an awful lot more to prove. Kai's is a citizen. I mean, and we hope that our students will come out of the program being citizens of the world, that they care about society and they want to make the world a better place. That's about it, honestly. On top of all the other stuff that we hope they learn. They also have the kind of, I hope that, and if they come out in our program, that they have the ambition to take something from the first line drawn to the completed project, which is a huge privilege for any architect, any student, any maker. I would have died for that opportunity. But you get such a condensed education in such a short period of time. And our students walk out and they're running projects in offices really quickly. So but they've also kind of got to take that step, which says, well, actually, and it's the dirty secret of the projects. I can't fit building these projects into an academic calendar. It's really difficult. For one thing, just because of the weather, right? Our students are more in tune with the weather at Rural Studio than probably any students. Maybe the ag department is in tune with the weather, but we're in tune with the seasons and when you can make. So, but they do have to make a commitment to stay and build the project because they feel it the right thing to do. So they have to own the project. So we work with them to really own the project. This is not my work. This is the work of students who are aged between 18 and 24 years old. And they do it all. They run meetings with amazing consultants. They run budgets. They're dealing with deliveries of material. And guess what? They're actually understanding how much a 2x4 weighs when you bring it onto site. Where is it delivered? Where shall I put it so I can use it very quickly? So for me, it's invaluable. And so all of that is craft. All of that is design, in my view. I'm already getting on my high horse. Just to say some other things real quick before you get into this litany of projects. I think all the work we're asked to do, and it's out of necessity. And really, frankly, it's because nobody else is doing it. We do have the luxury of asking some ethical questions. Should we do this? The privilege of being employed by a university is that as a not-for-profit, we're also not-for-profit, a 501c3, but I don't have to chase the money. I've still got a job. My teaching folks have still got a job, but we also don't have to take a project. We don't have to have our agenda determined by somebody, although it's getting more and more that way, you know, as money gets tighter. But you want to kind of be saying we're doing the right thing, because I'm so proud of being in a university that is a land grant institution. What an idea that you have an office in every county in the state. Unbelievable. And I think that mission of doing work in your backyard is really important. I mean, the hardest challenges in your life and is often in your own backyard. It's just you avoid them. You go somewhere, you fly somewhere, you do something, then you leave. We're doing work, and we've done a lot of projects, but it's all for our neighbors. So if we do well, we don't hear about it. If we screw up, you can bet you hear about it, right? And it's a fantastic, as an architect, as an educator, it's an amazing learning experience to be there, see how the building age, see how the programs that are running the buildings are involved with the buildings, how they survive, because that's the building, it's easy. The organizations and the institutions behind it, that's the difficult thing to maintain. You wear people out, they run out of money. It's always a crapshoot, right? I think lastly, we ask the students to borrow the place, just leave the place a little bit better than they found it. That's all we ask them to do. And have respect for the place. And I think what we've tried to be for the last 31 years is a good neighbor. And I think they've accepted us, and they now see us as a resource. So I'm sort of an insider and an outsider. You can tell I've got a silly accent, so I'm never going to be local. But I'm also not black, I'm not white, so I kind of ride this fine line. So then I'm going to shut up before I do embarrass my dean. I hope this does offer you a positive critique of how we teach and procure and make architecture. We're very much and all kudos to the university for supporting this. And it's odd that it's difficult for schools of architecture to do this because of liability, but so many schools have veterinary medicine and human medicine. It's like, well, how can we practice on people, but we're not allowed to practice on buildings? That's ridiculous. So kudos to the universities for supporting this and to the dean. Okay, so I'll shut up. I hope that I communicate the kind of pure, unadulterated joy in designing and making today. And you'd all better laugh at my jokes, or it's going to be a really long 35 minutes. So this is where no one's laughing. Come on, you all got to laugh. Learn to laugh. Thank you, that's good. We're all about disingenuous laughter, okay? So this is downtown Newbern. If you drive too quickly, which I do, you can often miss it. It's a little town of about 175, 180 people. We live essentially on the very edge of the civil rights triangle of Birmingham, Selma, and Montgomery. We live with that history every day. Really, the movement was started in the rural areas, a lot of bravery from an awful lot of local folks, most of whom ended up being involved in the Selma to Montgomery March. Often, many of them were unknowingly to their own families incarcerated, but it was also family on family. So in a place like ours, you know that there's an undercurrent of that every day. We're also 3.5 hours, well, depending on how you drive, whether it's 3.5 or 2.5 hours, how heavy your foot is, Mackenzie, from the university. So if we find out the grown-ups are coming out to check on us, we can suddenly tidy it all up in about 2 hours or so. Yeah, right, Dawn. Okay, so as for the rural, a few misconceptions. As you can see from the US Census Bureau, at least back in 2010, over the last, 130 years, 120 years, really the rural population has not changed at all. We all hear about the rural dying. It's actually not true. What's happened is the cities have changed greatly. And so that's a myth. One of the problems in a place like Newbern, Alabama and West Alabama, it's a little bit like the Appalachians, the Mississippi Delta. This place is an extraction landscape. Stuff is taken away and nothing and very little is given back. And that's what leads to poverty. This is essentially one of the bread baskets of the United States, and it's left in a state. It's kind of it's a version of colonialism, quite frankly. And, so you can see, here's the Mississippi Delta, here's the Black Belt, Appalachians, what need I say more, right? And then it gets further closer to home, and you're looking in here at Perry County, the birthplace of Coretta Scott King. 70 to 80% of the kids in Perry County, the county over from Hale County, are living in poverty. That is freaking disgusting. You don't need an English person to tell you that. It's just ridiculous in the year 2025 that we have that condition. And the other thing is that they're going home to housing that's unfit for human habitation. Why in society are we not having a conversation about housing being a human right? We have conversations about having, 3 parking spaces, but we don't talk about having housing for everybody. It's got to be a human right. So what does society believe in? And then connectivity. Here's the thing that I printed out. God, it's quite a while ago, but it's still kind of worthy of comment. My internet provider is one of those rip-off satellite things. I hope this has been broadcast worldwide, but they were delighting in the fact that my speed of my internet was 1,140.6% slower than the national average. Yippee, right? That's worth celebrating, isn't it? And what it means is the connectivity and all of the stuff that they talk about, medicine in rural area, we can do it by the internet, I'm sorry, it's bullshit. This has got to be equitable if you're going to have a connected citizenry and a conversation within society. And I would just love for society, there's rural folks don't know anything about urban folks don't know anything about rural folks. But I think there's got to be a conversation about that. We've got to talk to each other, and somehow that's got to be engaged in, because it's not doing any good at the moment. And you can see what happens, from the point of view of the elections. There are people that just felt that they're left behind. And I think this would help. It would probably engender even more of these horrible phones, but I think connected citizenry is really essential, kind of honestly, for society. So this is what Rural Studio looks like. It's all a bunch of undergraduates, 5th years and 3rd years. They're actually asked to do extraordinarily mature things. We only let the ladies play with the big toys, just so you know. I don't know what's happened to the male of the species today. And we never let them wear hard hats, of course. So don't look at that, all right? So this is downtown Newbern. This was the School of Architecture in downtown Newbern. 3 fragile institutions, the Red Barn, the post office, and Newbern Mercantile. This was the Red Barn a few years ago, even before you went into this, Dawn. We always used to say, well, this is, this for the students. This is an environmental experience. In summer, you put your clothes on, and in winter, you take your clothes off. Or maybe it's vice versa. Is anyone listening to that? Yeah, okay, good. But we took the building after my predecessor died to get the Rural Studio out of the ivory tower of its own headquarters, down into downtown and animate the space. So we do events, things like pumpkin carving, where local kids and our kids come together and carve pumpkins. We have a thing called Halloween costume contest. So this is Main Street, and this is Toy Story walking up around Main Street in Newbern, Alabama. We have a review at that time where everybody gets dressed up, all the reviewers, all of the professors, everybody that shows up has to dress up in costume. And then you have, for example, here, 3 people dressed as toilets talking about a really serious architecture project, right? So all good stuff. And really it's what that's about, is like we take the work very seriously, but we don't take ourselves too seriously. It's a wonder I wasn't struck by lightning wearing that outfit. We have remarkable consultants from all over the world that are just captured by the kind of can-do attitude. This is a guy called Anderson Inge, originally a Texan, now in London, doing proportional scale modeling and then testing it to destruction and really starting to look in the model, what was it that failed? So it's everything for us is hands-on. It's also, most of it is drawing by hand, not letting machines spec things out. So we have people of the quality of Glenn Murcutt showed up for our 20th anniversary. That was one of the most, he's the Pritzker Prize winner from Australia, and he showed up in little old West Alabama. So the rest of downtown, which is really the heart of our community, there's the post office. We used to nickname her Beyonce, but you know, this is the place where you kind of bump into your neighbors and you say hello. So everything we mail at Royal Studio goes through this place. We're trying to keep that alive, and it's really important, no matter what the federal government's trying to do to it. And then a mercantile store where you can go there, and obviously you can buy Colt 45 and orange juice, which purveys a really good, healthy diet. But GB Woods was there 39 years and 10 months, and it's been struggling since then, because this guy made a life there. It was who he was. He was that place, you know, so we're looking for the next person, and the building is under renovation now, so we're really hopeful. So we're in Tornado Alley. You've got to be aware of the weather. Locally, the kind of economy is some tree farming, lumber, definitely into beef herds, and then catfish ponds. Some genius figured out that if you dug a hole in this red clay dirt, because most of that beautiful black belt soil, which is a beautiful black pillar, has actually been washed away or poisoned or over-cultivated. So what's left is this shitty red clay, which is actually terrible to build on because it expands and contracts. But guess what? If you dig a hole and you fill it full of water, it super saturates and you've got yourself an instant pond. So the farmers are diversifying between many of these different things. You can actually, you know, all you have to do with the pond is take the water out, you can send the cows back in. They don't really care that it's in a hole, right? And these catfish ponds are full with catfish, cheek by jowl with these. So that's like, you know, but a lot of people are going to service industries in Tuscaloosa and commuting to Birmingham. So their kids are left alone from 3 o'clock in the afternoon to when they get home. That's an issue. We look at the antebellum homes to kind of learn from history, not about the dubious nature under which these were constructed, but these are timber houses built 150, 170 years ago without air conditioning. Good God. Lifted off the ground. They're wood, they're still there. Great tall ceilings and ventilated at the ceiling level. Porches, big windows, staircases that act like chimneys. You know, there's a lot to learn from this stuff. And then the farming, the farming vernacular. Oh, look at this one. This was actually on a slave plantation. So this sort of center entrance is like vestiges of kind of you can tell this was built by slaves because there's kind of that's a kind of a reflection of that history. But look at that from an architectural point of view. Any architect would love to build this. Lift the timber off the ground, put a great big roof over the top of it. You could build that, you know, build that building out of, you know, mashed potatoes and it would still be there, right? So we work in about a 25-mile radius. We've worked in 4 counties in West Alabama. This was one of the first houses we did, probably still the best house. The Haybale House, great southern porch. This was a, he went fishing, so smokehouse built of local roadside concrete. And the whole house was actually built of straw bales as well. So beautiful. The southern porch, so important, right, for the collective. We built quite a lot of idiosyncratic houses, so probably the first 6, 7 years, very much based on individual families, pinpointing families and getting to know them. This is one that we built out of 8,000 carpet tiles that were donated by, sorry, too long of a day. Interface carpets, and I don't know that we do this house today. We did find out these carpets had been in storage for 8 years. So they had off-gassed, and they proved to be thermally superb. It's a really thick wall, so acoustically and thermally, they're actually fantastic. And so this was the house that was built. This was a tornado shelter in the basement. The students were determined to make a funky shape on top of it that looked like the house had been hit by a tornado, because you've got to be an architect, you know. But the inside, oh dear. Well, the inside, this is the family. And, you know, I'm always ambiguous about this house, but I do know that AJ, this family was in 2 rooms previously in a shack. Their mum and dad were on dirt floors. They weren't quite on dirt floors, but AJ's response and school, suddenly have his own bedroom, was off the charts. And of course, they're very proud of this house. You go talk to Lucy today, she's the only woman in the world that has a house built out of carpet. And that, you know. So, but of course, they also want to, you know, fill it with the appropriate furniture. So they go off and they get themselves in debt with the fancy furniture from the store where they're paying it through the nose for a long period of time. But they only want what we have all got, which is right. It's okay, right? So we started to kind of move away from such idiosyncrasies as trying to detail carpet tiles touching other things to say, could we really essentially focus on timber? We live in a forest in Alabama. So how do we start to do that? This is one of the first ones. This was a house for Rosalie Turner. Sadly, it burnt down, but we built the front half, and then the extension was built out the back for the 2 sons to live in, and we built a courtyard around it. There's John Marusic, who was third-year instructor at the time. And this, you know, some of this was scavenged from Mary Ward Brown. I don't know if you remember her, great Southern writer. We took a lot of this timber from trees that we milled on her piece of property. So here's Rosalie, just kind of radiant in her new home, incredible lady. And we're building this house in her front yard. And, you know, she had a tumble down old house that could not be saved. So she's like the neighborhood, she's neighborhood watch in this. All of this was hand milled. Started around the late 90s in the last century, doing small public projects. This was a little community center come Chaya Chapel, built with Chevrolet Caprice automobiles that were attached to a frame and then sat on top of a rammed earth wall. A really spectacularly beautiful place. The catch on something like this, and this is where we started to learn from early projects, is that you know, they had no way of securing it. So the local kids would go in there and graffiti on the walls and put their names on the walls. And folks like y'all would show up out there and go, don't these people care about this building? And the people over there are actually at work trying to earn a crust every day, and they can't be the watchdogs for this. So you've got to be careful how you quote unquote help folks, honestly. So this is another one that we did. 900 tires from Selma. A guy was being sued to get rid of all of these tires. Sited on a ravine on a piece of private property, so a private family chapel. The tires were covered in pink concrete with a barn that was demolished to make the roof. This, at the end of the 90s, was named one of the buildings of the decade of the century by one of the architectural magazines, and it was just extraordinary. That's the sort of the view back, looking back from the pulpit in the ravine. It's really amazing. But built on a piece of private property, the property's changed hands, so we can't go and show the public anymore. So you live and learn. This is really what I found when I showed up in Hale County in 1999. This is Alberta Bryant. And there was a sort of proliferation of trailers in that period from when I showed up to today. This is affordable rural social housing, or whatever you want to call it. It is cheap crap. It's not about people. It's about something that you can move down a highway, dimension to run down the highway, and sold like an automobile. And in the same way that an automobile loses value, so does this. You pay through your nose for 30 years, the roof will have gone in 30 years. So you have no real real property, this simply chattel property. So we suddenly said, and I said, could we, instead of doing an idiosyncratic house every year, could we start to ask ourselves if we could build a house that had some longevity, could have some capital in it, be something that the family would own, and because in rural places, land is so cheap, you do not buy or build a house to flip it. It's very different. In rural condition, it becomes owned by the family and it gets handed down. That's a very important difference. So we started to say, well, could we compete with the trailer? The trailer is kind of brilliant because you can go to your local lot, you can pick it out and you can get it next day. We couldn't do that. So we looked at what the cost of it could be, and we said about $100 a month is what you could pay in a mortgage or rent. And what would that look like in a mortgage? That would be looking like something like $20,000 on a 30-year mortgage, right? So then at that time in 2003, 2004, we said, well, can we make this a local industry, building houses locally for local people, get labor involved? We were looking at about 8 and 12K. The incredible opportunities that it would be for a rural place if we could get that going. So we've been looking at models. We were looking at these models for a number of years. We got it in the studio. I thought the students would get bored with it because it's really scratching something out of nothing. Nobody else is designing affordable housing because nobody can afford to design it, right? No architect, no designer, no developer has the time to spend the billions of hours that we have spent doing this. So there's almost a moral and social responsibility that we have in academia, unless we bring in somebody and follow up Trump with a socialist, and we go back to the idea that good housing could be for everybody, the first models that we really liked, this is and they ended up looking like kind of, it's odd because we ended up coming up with some models that were simply, they were all about material efficiency. So this is a shotgun house. It's named a shotgun house because you can actually, and it's an old rural vernacular, you can actually shoot your gun all the way through the doors in the house and it goes all the way through. So if you're kind enough to open the front door and open the back, your mother can shoot all the way through. Come on, somebody, wake up. But it's tough. We said, 5 windows, 2 doors. Where do you position the windows? Let's go for tall ceilings so that the hot air rises and you use a ceiling fan to move it. And so we went on this investigation. This is a side entrance, living on the right, sleeping on the left, kitchen in the middle. They were all named after their first occupants. This is Mac's house, god damn. And then this is a house for Joanne that kind of tested the premise of a square being, if anyone's interested in geometry, apparently you get more square footage if you do a square or a circle than you do if you do a rectangle. So we ended up having a little bit bigger house here, living space on the north of this drawing, sleeping space on the south of this drawing, and a beautiful kind of grand living room with a galley kitchen. And we did stuff that, if you go and teach at Harvard, you don't talk about stuff like this, but we put the ugly American refrigerator next to the window so you'd bounce light into the space. Really great design moves, highfalutin design moves. So what we've done in-house is start to critique some of this, thinking more about adaptability and flexibility in the long term. This is Joanne's house. We decided to move a back door into the back bedroom and put a sleeping nook in the living room because Ophelia wanted to sleep in a living room, and suddenly Ophelia tells us she's got a 2-bedroom house now. And what that means is that 2 people can also live in that house and access the house without disturbing somebody else. So we're listening, and what we have been doing, we were doing from 2004 to about 2017, Mac, was just really only watching how people lived. And so this is a kind of classic example. Houses around us, 1961, they built that. And until 2012, they kept adding on. Guess what that did? It meant that each of those new rooms had a different foundation system. So the whole thing moved like that, and guess where it leaked? It leaked at the place where they were all connected. So we started to look at, could we do something where you could expand underneath it? Or could you do something where you built enough internal space that there could be adaptability and flexibility? So a 100-year house, thinking about how families live. So I might go in there, get married, have a kid. And what does that look like in 10 years' time when my girlfriend's dumped me and I'm there with my grandmother comes in? So that kind of evolution of the family lifestyle, can you design for that? One scenario was Reggie's house, and it spoke particularly to that idea of building a piece at a time. We built Reggie's house, we pre-eminated the big roof. We said, this is going to be the big structure. And then we built him 2 pieces underneath it. One is a living space and one's a room at the front where he could actually expand into. It was pre-plumbed, but he would have to finish it out. It also has the opportunity to extrude this volume all the way to the front and that volume all the way to the back and make a 5-bedroom house. And he could do that without screwing up the roof or touching the column. So that's been one strategy that we've been looking at. This is Reggie's home. Reggie loves living outdoors as well. So it's really a kind of an ode to outdoor living on the porch, which is apparently what Venice Biennale are interested in. So then this is a house that looked at the idea of, could you build a kind of a big envelope and then change the way they operated on the inside? So this is a house for Patrice. It's kind of an up and over house. Has 2 doors, back door, front door. There's a kitchen here, living here, and then there's a dividing wall to a back unit that has 2.5 rooms in the back. So that can be a granny flat, an Airbnb, it can be a hairdresser's. And the rest of the family, if they want, can live upstairs, or you can open that dividing door and have a 5-bedroom house, right? So that's another strategy for dealing with that. Here you can see the internal finishes. All of these projects, the majority of these projects are built by 4 students from design to completion. There's the opening. It's me showing my legs. The kind of drawings that they make, they're the builders. So they make drawings that they're going to build from. It actually means something, right? This is the opening. This is another one that we did, an 18 by 18 house. So imagine sleeping on the ground floor and living on the 2nd floor. This came from a provocation from a partner outside of the rural studio. Could we build a house on a 2 parking lot space that's 18 by 18 feet? And then you go up inside. So you're sleeping on the ground and then you discover this amazing space in the 2nd floor. And this is for a young fella in Hale County who's a local leader and he wants to stay on the family property. And the footprint of that piece of property, because of heirs property, there's many members of family own that piece of property. So he's only got a little bit of a footprint. And the 18 by 18 has come in handy because our other projects actually couldn't fit on that. So yeah, so that was Reggie. And all of this has evolved into, 2017, Fannie Mae got on the phone to us and said, we're interested we've got rural housing mortgages. We don't have any rural housing models. And they said, can we come and look at your housing models? And I thought somebody was joking with me. The federal, the people that manage the mortgage, the money in the mortgage industry wanted to come to a Tim Pot program in West Alabama run by undergraduate students and look at housing models. Well, they showed up. And so now suddenly we have product lines and we're working with a whole, how many people, come on, Mac, how many partners have we got? How many states? Come on, tell them all. You'll blow them away. Just invent a number. 24 partners, 14 states in the Southeast are starting to use these models. Unbelievable, it gives me goosebumps. So, Mac actually took some of we sort of started to think about how could we help people build these homes. We took the idea from IKEA. Mac did this amazing book of drawings on, here you go, anybody can build this house. Here's a manual for building this home. we've started to look at all of these homes and start to understand that the thermal envelope has to be much better, because the not-for-profits and the local partners that we're working with, they have to know what the long-term running costs of these houses are, so they can actually spend more money up front. So we're trying to get them to spend more up front because they know that they're not going to have to spend more down the road. So we did a series of these models. Matt started testing them all, so we started to understand which kind of systems, which kind of envelope was the best. So we went through modeling, testing, verifying, monitoring, and the wonderful thing now from our point of view is we've got this kind of fantastic kind of circle of knowledge. You've got the academic program over here and the front porch initiative over here that's getting knowledge from out there, from people that are building, from organizations that need help with rural housing. And all of that information is coming back into the academic program, challenging us, and then we come back with new models. So you get the point. And you know, this is an example, 4 of these where we had to get a zoning, or not ordinance, but zoning variance. There you go. Thank you. She can translate for building 4 of these. So you also understand that suddenly I can build 4 homes on this site. All of these not-for-profits get given the shittiest property because it's not worth it. But suddenly, if you have a zoning variance and you get 4 houses on there, and how many people you're housing in there, suddenly the value of that property goes up. Big deal, right? Mackenzie herself has also been working to get the sweat equity of folks that work on homes for habitat knocked off the value of the mortgage. That's right, isn't it, Mackenzie, in a nutshell, which everybody, I mean, I think they actually stood up and applauded you in the room, didn't they, Mackenzie, kind of for figuring this out, what it would cost in what the families putting the sweat equity into building those homes, what the value of that was. So it was worth their while to help build a home. So back in Newbern, first public building in Newbern for 110 years, Newbern Town Hall. This is the protective equipment that we always ask our students to wear. Okay, somebody's awake. You know, these are the kind of folks that we work with. None of them are architects. They don't speak architectural bullshit. You have to talk to them like a normal person. It's like talking to your mum about what you're doing, right? Down in Newbern, we were losing a lot of houses because of house fires. There was a very slow response time from the fire departments in West Perry County and Greensboro. So houses were burning, hits you in the pocketbook. What happens? Well, we're going to establish a volunteer fire department. You hit people in the pocketbook and they do something about it. So they established a volunteer fire department. I got involved, and then they found that they could get grants to fight brush fires. And the prerequisite was, if we're going to give you these trucks as part of this grant, you can't let those trucks freeze, because there's no fire hydrants out in rural areas. You carry all of these are pumper trucks. They've all got water in them. So these things can't go out to the site and be frozen. So that designed the building for us. Great southern wall, letting the low winter sun in, keeping the hot summer sun out. Concrete floor, helping keeping that truck cool and warm at the same time during the season. And this was built by 2 guys and 2 gals in about 2 years, helped the community raise $110,000 for this project. And a lot of the community helped with this project. The fire department was so successful, they needed a place to have classes. And also the town didn't have a town hall. So we designed and built Newbern Town Hall. Again, this was 3 guys and 1 gal. The big question with this project was, what do you build it out of? The firehouse had become quite famous at that time, so we said, let's build something that has some weight and gravitas, and it's it's sourced locally. So we built it out of 8-inch by 8-inch cypress logs. It's essentially a log cabin, stacked one on top of the other. It's got these threaded rods that run all the way through it, and then a gasket that makes it sealed when you tighten it up. We do huge numbers of mock-ups at Rural Studio to test things. The major physical challenge with this project was a big beam over the entrance. This was the first meeting, big meeting we had there, this was about them closing, reducing the hours at the Newburn post office. Everyone was angry about that and knew why they were angry. So they now have a town hall, and what's amazing in the last few years, there's been trouble in Newburn relative to the mayoral position, but they've actually got a place where democracy happens and where those battles are happening. So if we did one thing, it was help them have a town hall, no matter what it looks like. The building, the way it looks is actually determined by the fact that that entire wall would shrink up to 3 inches over its 11-foot height because the timber is drying. So what do? We put the windows on the outside and the doors on the inside. So if the wall shrinks, it doesn't break the window, right? So here's the council chamber. You can see looking down Main Street. So you can see democracy in action in Newburn, Alabama when you're driving by. I always like to say, these 6 lovely ladies got together. This lady here bugged me for about 3 years on getting a library in Newburn, Alabama. This was the old bank building that was abandoned in the 30s. It had been temporarily used as the town hall. And so we converted it into this. A major issue was bringing fiber optic internet into town. Only Auburn and this library has fiber optic internet because AT&T will not support the cost of maintaining fiber optic access to our neighbors. Screw them. But it's a beautiful space, and these ladies running this space are going gangbusters. It's extraordinary. It's really become the community center for Newburn. What else to tell you? This gal, she hid Dr. Kling from the Ku Klux Klan in Greensboro, Alabama, 2 weeks before he was assassinated. He was at the churches and was preaching, and often those churches were burnt afterwards. So Teresa hid him one night in the building on the left. Teresa in the early 2000s, 2006, came to me and said, "Can you help us with these 2 buildings?" They own this. They had established a Safe House Black History Museum, which commemorated that night, but also commemorated all the foot soldiers that were in the movement. So we renovated and we connected them together. And we said, let's give it one entrance and have a self-guided tour, because we knew all the foot soldiers are also dying as well. And that was, Teresa said, I'm going to be dead soon. So how are we going to keep this alive? So we took this off the back, we renovated the building, and then we proved 2 extensions. The one on the right is the entrance with an accessible entrance for everybody. And then this is the space, because the museum's so small, you need a space for evolving exhibits to get people to come back. So this is the fritted glass to keep the temperature down. This is the march from Selma to Montgomery, many of whom the folks were from Greensboro. This is what we found inside in the community building, not the museum side. And what was interesting about this was we uncovered this and we're like, well, as architects, we like this, but we don't want to patronize folks. And so we showed it to Teresa and the board, and they're like, it's beautiful. Yeah, I'll show this to everybody. So, so here's the entrance to the museum with the kind of artifacts and the self-guided tour. This is the kind of revolving exhibit. There's Teresa on the left, built by 3 students. This one's working in Birmingham. This one's working at Plato in San Antonio, and this one's kicking people's backsides in Atlanta, just doing amazing work. So I probably should finish soon. So we learned also to be able to do large projects. This was a 900-acre park that we did in Perry County. There was no outdoor recreational space. The place had been closed in the 60s because people had died in these oxbow lakes. The probate judge actually took me around in here on his 4-wheeler, and they had an existing campground. So he said, let's do the pavilion first. So this was a beautiful pavilion, and that was the first project. Second project, the mayor and the probate judge liked the first project so much, the mayor actually carried a photograph of the project around in his wallet. And they said, we were going to get prefabricated restrooms, but can you do the most amazing restrooms? So these guys built not only the restrooms, but the walkway from the entranceway to the pavilion. And then they produced the three, I would suggest, the three most remarkable pooping experiences in the United States of America. So there's a tall toilet, the mound toilet, and the long toilet. So this is a view from the tall toilet. You can sit there and talk to God up there. And then in this one, this is where you can sit alone and you can actually talk to a tree, which is like talking to another faculty member at Auburn. Oh, thank you. This is a mound toilet, so you can sit in the mound and you can, this is in the fire lane, so you can sit there with your shotgun and shoot the deer as they run across. This is a bridge that we built to give access to a fire tower, a birding tower that the community wanted. These are kinds of drawings we made. This was an engineer sketch that we literally built, kinds of drawings we make, built it up the road, and then put it on an axle and a hitch, and that's me and the students running down behind the truck, taking the truss down to the site. And then one weekend, Crane Works out of Birmingham donated a crane, and we lowered it into place, put the two outside trusses down, and then drop the center arch down into place, and it all fit, can you believe? So then you cover that structure, so you protect the structure, you keep it out of the water, and you hang the walking surface from below it, right? Very pretty. Go to Perry Lakes Park, it's really beautiful. Funding is a problem as effing usual. And then, you know, this is one of those, wow, okay. They want us to do a birding tower. They wanted to get the birding fraternity to come from Birmingham, spend all their money in the local. This was the county commission in Perry County. We tried in that period of time, I forget which. It was the hurricane before Katrina. Hurricane Ivan came through, took all these trees down. So we spent about 2 months trying to design this whole thing out of wood, and it looked like it's fucking pyramid. So it was ridiculous. And then somebody showed up and said, "Why don't you go and get one of those disused fire towers?" And within a week, the team had found a disused fire tower for $5. So suddenly, I'm in this oh shit moment. I'm going to have students working 100 feet up. What shall we do? And in those days, I was able to say, well, what do you think? You all go and find yourself tower training. I'm going to treat you like adults. They went off. They found a tower trainer out of Mobile. He trained them on the tower. They took it down piece by piece. And they took it off, they got it re-galvanized, bolted it all together, put the foundations in the ground with helical anchors, and rebuilt it. There was no concrete trucks, no nothing. Safest project we've ever done. There was only 4 people allowed on that project. Natalie, who runs our communications, this gal, is scared of heights. She still to this day doesn't believe she did it. So anyway. So then we, you know, this is Lions Park, several phases. 10 years, 1 phase at a time, restrooms, ball fields, 6 ball fields, concession stand that opens and closes like a mouth, skate park. All these teams were 4 students. Playground, 3,000 galvanized steel barrels to make an adventure playground. There was a gal that worked on this that if you do 3,000 barrels time 6 welds, no, 8 welds, 3 times 8 is 20. So she did 24,000 welds putting this together. Little gal. Scout hut, exercise stations, all different projects. Boys and Girls Club, we did this. This was all built out of timber. This team. The team there, they actually helped the community raise $170,000 in materials donations for that project. And yeah, I think the most important thing about this project was that the police chief was on the board. So it was very clear that he felt that the kids were getting into trouble after school, and so hence doing a Boys and Girls Club. We've done a whole bunch of, this is different multi-unit housing now for sheltered housing for ladies. This is a beautiful courtyard we just did very recently for Horseshoe Farm. The students did all the welding on this. The contractor allowed him to go to his shop in Birmingham and fabricate all of this. And he said it was an $180,000 package of welding if he had done it himself. So I'm not going to talk about this. This is an idea for us as people involved in building to kind of get sick of the idea of wrapping buildings with stuff that you don't know what you're wrapping the building with. So we went back to a monomaterial, and the idea was to invent a ventilation strategy that accepted that a building leaked. So you have I can shut up soon, yeah. All right, you have a hot heat source inside, hot air rises, it pulls the cool air through the walls, and the tributary area of the holes in the wall, when you're pulling the cool air in, would actually capture the heat that's been lost through the wall. So it takes a lot of science to understand all of that. We tested it through a series of small tests, scientific tests. The great thing is we actually ended up with 3 scientific papers from the Rural Studio being published on this, which is like ridiculous. So what we were trying to do was get to the playing field, to get into the game, instead of corporations telling us it's a good thing to wrap the building with this. Screw you, we're going to come up with, now what do we know about wood today? And let's build a new wood building that reflects what we know today, rather than just building it the way we've built it for 120 years. So another experiment, learning from termites, how they deal with internal thermal mass to cool and heat during the diurnal seasons. We built 2 buildings that tested that and actually proved that wood is almost as good as a thermal mass internally as concrete. Everyone thinks concrete's the deal. Not true. Wood is really close. So all scientifically done. To end, I think I'm just going to say that in a rural place like this, you know, agriculture has become very industrialized. The delivery of food has also become very industrialized. So it's changed the way our towns look, right? They don't look like that anymore. They look like this. And you drive miles to buy prepackaged processed shit that has come from God knows where. That's a big deal. It's a big deal on diet. It really changes what your streets look like. But it does this. This, if you remember nothing else from this conversation, this is a McDonald's meal that's 3 years old. Nothing has eaten it. The fries smell the same. The burger smells the same. So, you know, our area, what is it, 2030? 60 to 100% obese. That's a catastrophe. It's not a problem. So we took on the idea of farming our own property, understanding how to, this is really a soil reclamation project. So we now, our students today in the program, they harvest, they sow, they reap, they harvest, they care for, and then we all eat the food together. So we're producing 8,000 pounds of vegetables a year, trying to understand how to cultivate that land. We built ourselves a greenhouse. Locally, a local council asked us to build a farmer's market because they realized there wasn't anywhere to display fresh vegetables. So, come on. All right, it's given up on me. It said, screw you, enough. Okay, so this is a thing being dragged up the road. So it could be, because the farmer's market was kind of squatting at the time. Oops. So it had to be movable. I don't know why it's locked. Anyway, it's only like 3 slides left. Oh, here you go. So that's what and it was amazing in our community. So, you know, be careful of that shit on the left and eat locally. I'm going to shut up because I'm being disrespectful to the 2 lovely ladies that I'm going to talk with. So, thank you. Can I sit on
Thank
the,
you.
can I
Yes,
just,
grab a
can,
seat.
can I just sit on the floor?
We've got
All right. Oh, you do?
of conversation, and I'm sure everyone had questions.
Oh, you're making me sit in the
And
middle.
again, I'll get the microphone and pass around, so feel free to raise your hands at any point, just so I know that you have a question waiting.
What?
What time? I'm looking at my notes now. If we finish within the next 10 to 15 minutes.
Do you want to start with questions? But I don't want to preclude you going first if you've got one that's burning.
No, well, I guess I wonder if we can start with this idea of the rural and the place. I mean, this very obvious place, but what it means to work in a rural place. I mean, both obviously the kind of, again, statistical demonstration you're giving us, how many people, what's the income level, what are the challenges facing this place, but also like, what does it mean to do work in rural space? Like, how is there, let's say, maybe like a method to working in rural space, and how is that something, I mean, that's like extremely inspiring to the way that it's obviously structured this practice over the years. But as I saw some of the newer projects, I wanted to ask you, like, I mean, with all of the acclaim and all of the projects and all of this new investment, this front porch project in particular, I was kind of curious about how do you maintain this ethos or this method of like, or ethics, we might say, of what it means to work in rural space, right? The people, the materials, the kind of happenstance, the research, the kind of investment that you all have made there. I guess I was thinking about like one of the things that I know architects often say about public housing and affordable housing, and one of the biggest challenges is scalability, right? That it's great to prototype something on the one hand, but how do you figure out something that's going to scale? How do you actually think about supply chains? How do you think about constructing this on a mass scale and reaching lots of places? And what was this totally inspiring figure, 24 states or 24, and I'm sure I'm misquoting this, in 14 states, thank you very much. Which is like huge and laudable. And if you follow anything about affordable housing, very, very difficult to do, right? On the one hand, but in some elements of tension to other things that you're doing. And I'm curious if you could talk about how you all think about that balance in a way. Like, what does it mean to keep?
Was there 12 questions there or what?
Well, what does it mean? What does it mean to keep the rural? Because I know that that's really important to what you all are doing, right?
Yeah.
Like, how do you keep the rural as you become successful and known and showing in Venice and all of these kinds of things, right? Like, how does the rural move into the world?
Yeah.
Is that
I feel that too. I come from a place in Scotland that's not a million miles away from Newburn. It's in the Scottish borders. It's about an hour and a half from the big city, which is Edinburgh. The town that I grew up in had about 6,000 people, but the village that my mum moved to and we spent a lot of time in probably has no more than 1,000 people in it. So slightly bigger than Newburn. But if we'd had a rural studio in that place with the amount of projects that you have done, it would have radically reshaped that village. It would have really visibly, but also structurally reshaped it.
Yeah.
And so Maura's question I really was curious about too, like how have you maintained that tension that comes in between reimagining and providing things that community wants and needs, but also how do you teach your students about community consultation, about listening before doing, about understanding what's being asked for versus what they're interested in making?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have a lot of legitimacy by living there and being there. And I'm never not off duty. I'm always the director of the Raw Studio. Yeah. Whether I'm going to
dinner,
one of the local restaurants or going into the post office. So that's actually a big deal, because when I showed up, there was still this sort of tension, I think, and some standoffishness, I think, particularly from I think the locals were, the Black Belt's a place that that's always why I'm always worried about using the term research. Yeah. When you're working with your neighbors.
It's very loaded. A word with a lot of history.
And it's like using the term poverty. Yeah. People don't know they're in poverty until some bugger shows up and says you're in poverty. Yeah. Right? So I think the legitimacy of digging our heels in, being there, not going away. Because when, like I was about to say, when I showed up, it really felt there was suspicion that we were doing these things and then we were going to leave. And that had been the pattern previously. I'll come there, I'll do my PhD research, and then you disappear. And we have, by look of our judgment, 3 years in, there was a piece of property that was donated. Suddenly we had a home. Suddenly we were a neighbor. And so just being there is legitimizes you. And that's just, I mean, really, yeah, good. And trying to do what you say you're going to do, and communicating as well as you can. And none of that's perfect. But I mean, I think that's I mean, there are many programs that will fly somewhere. There are similar programs to this that might do one project a year locally, or often they go off to, you know, Africa and do something and then leave. I have absolutely no idea how they know whether they did any good or not.
Yeah.
And we get a sense of that just by being there. And you know, we also, it means we've got a commitment to helping with, we give the homeowners a year's warranty. So that's pretty much long enough that they can figure out whether or not anything, there's a plumbing screw up or something. And then with the community projects, we never really let go of those. I mean, we're still changing boards at Perry Lakes Park. We were doing that last week. So you're a neighbor, you got to do that. No one else is going to do it. We'll, you know, we'll step up to the mark. So I don't know if I answered any of your questions, but I think
You did, yeah.
Just being there and trying
Being
to
a
be as
neighbor.
honest as you can.
Yeah.
Yeah, and not also, I never think of myself as an academic. I swear way too much for that. And,
It's a British
I have
thing.
I have
Me
this
too.
sort of sexy accent
It's an
that
architect thing too.
makes you think they're talking to the Queen or
Yeah.
something, you know.
Well, one of the things I was going to ask, sort of connected to that, and you sort of started to answer it, or did answer it really, Andrew, was I wanted to know, because we're talking here in this gathering about the connections between pedagogy and place and
Yeah.
other things, but that
Yeah.
connection. And I wanted to know what it actually looks like in your
Yeah.
classroom to be that good neighbor, or to understand policy as well as producing
Well,
something.
they
And then
get-
you're telling me about like
they get-
swapping out boards
Yeah,
in,
they
in
get a
maintaining.
rant. The students get the great thing is that, as I said, we work with a collective, we work as a team, and our collective goal is doing a project. So that means you've actually got something with the community to talk about. You've got a collective desire. That builds amazing relationships over time. So it's not like you're all put together. It's like, well, what are we going to talk about? Having that collective goal is fantastic, whether it's a house or a community project. And that I think, but at the beginning of the semester, I'll say, look, we've been here 31 years. Don't screw up.
Yeah.
Do not go out there and tell people how to live their lives. You just don't. You will, please do not do that. And you know, our students, particularly our fifth years, are working in all of the local restaurants. People grow to know them and love them. And so they're trying to be active members in that community. And they like the locals. You can imagine it's, our particular town is sort of, the elderly whites are dying off. So it's going to be mainly a black population. And there's quite a few young kids out there. And so you know, you want your students to understand, or our students to understand, this program has become trusted as a neighbor because of your predecessors. It's not me.
Yeah.
It's the hard work of those previous students that have put
Yeah.
you all in the position to do this. So don't let them down. Don't let Samuel Mockbee down. Don't let the university down. First and foremost, don't let yourselves down, right? Don't go do something stupid at a party. And also, you know, honestly, be safe on a job site. I mean, you know, knock on wood, and, you know, obviously something will happen on Monday, but we really haven't had a single terrible accident in 31 years. It's been amazing. And it's, I think they grow to care about the place. Most of them are suburban or city kids. There'll be the odd one that's been in that situation, but they grow to love the place and kind of recognize the opportunities of being in a place like that and cross those that threshold of misconception and preconception that they have, because we all don't know each other. I mean, it's a shame that, and perhaps one of the things about the pandemic was people started to work from home, and I think you could have a pretty damn good quality of life in a place like Greensboro, Alabama, if there was a decent internet connection, because pretty much everything
this idea
else
of
is there.
network.
So have that imagination, and you really get to know your neighbor. And we pride ourselves on not taking sides. I mean, the Black Belt is essentially democratic, but there's a lot of folks that are the other way, and I can't take sides because I need to work with everybody. And if there's national news about the mess that's going on in Newbern, I'm like, well, let's just let the legal system take care of that. It'll sort itself out, and then we'll be there at the end to work with whoever we need to work with. We basically work with anybody that's trying to do positive things. We don't care whether they're black, white, pink, or green. And that's our kind of manifesto.
Can I just give you an opportunity to brag about your alumni of the program for a moment? I mean, I'm just thinking still about this idea of what is it? What are these essential things? Like, you're using these super important terms like trust and accountability, right? Collaborative kind of practice, right? That these can be kind of distilled. And how do you see alumni of the program taking that up and, sort of putting their own spin on it, obviously interpreting the project, if it's a collective project, taking it in new directions?
Well, whether they're building a house or they're involved in a community project, I hope that they're thinking about how to communicate with people about what they do. I think they're having the opportunity to build something gives them a total leg up in terms of being able to talk to a builder or a contractor, that they actually know how heavy a 2x4 is. And wow, there's a pack of 50 2x4s coming onto site, and I got to put it somewhere so I can use it. Because so everything we do, we're thinking that these 4 students in front of us have got to build it. And so that allows them an insight into the world of the builder and the maker, but also allows them to think about how they would manage that down the road. I think their career trajectories, I mean, they're told what it says, or it said, or in that piece of bump that's in the program, that I think it does challenge the way that architects are educated, clearly. It also I mean, our students are between the ages, the older students are between the ages of maybe 21 to 24. They're doing remarkable things. I mean, that town hall, a guy that won the AIA gold medal was there for the opening, and that's the AIA gold medals it's the highest award in the United States architecture. And he was there at the opening, and I sat next to him, and he's like, Andrew, if I'd done this project, I'd have fucked it up. And that, what a compliment to those students. So they're, I think, they there's obviously the materiality, the tactility, but I think they're asked to communicate with people. We don't do that very well at schools of architecture. And a big part of what we do is communicating. And, the drawings might be good, but do we teach people how to communicate with folks that are not architects? They also get to be makers, and many of our students have gone off into a maker's fields. Many are working in not-for-profit. We just had somebody go off working with Hack. Mackenzie is just about leading the Front Porch Initiative, and this amazing initiative that just, for us, I think it was a dream, and like suddenly wow. I mean, just ridiculous that an undergraduate program could be the energy to help people across however many states. But our students end up all over the place. You know, we had somebody went and worked for NASA. I mean, there's also people that will just go locally and go to a normal office and push a bar of soap around because they haven't been in an office. But what they also do is that they go into an office knowing, and I never got this, but they go into an office knowing who to ask. They're not expected to know everything. They work as a team, but they also get exposure to environmental engineers, structural engineers, the plethora of people that can help them with the decisions. So they're really, I hope we empower them. We probably breed monsters.
Well, and I would hope also a respect for expertise, right?
Yeah,
A respect
yeah.
for other forms of
No,
expertise,
absolutely.
community expertise, other forms of
Totally.
engineering expertise, something else
Yeah.
that I think architects haven't historically
Totally.
always been
Yeah.
great at
I
navigating.
would hope so. Yeah.
And to that,
I mean, it's not, we try not to be architects with a big A.
not to, you know.
What's the
these-
design build, right? There's
Yeah.
a specific pedagogy, there's a specific history to that in the US
Yeah.
that comes out in other schools too, like
Yeah.
Estimar in
Yeah.
Vermont,
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
example.
Yeah, sure.
This is not one of one, it is part of a tradition of thinking through
Absolutely.
how architecture has been taught and how architecture students have often been quite dissatisfied with that and
totally.
have tried to figure out ways where they can put their hands on a building at some point in their studies rather than just, as you say, I love the idea of pushing a piece of soap around or like working only in an office, only with paper or now with digital, never really understanding how something comes to its end, not only in terms of the physicality of building, but in terms of policy, in terms of communication, as you were saying, in terms of listening too, because one of my favorite, I don't know if anybody else has watched the Pruitt-Igoe myth documentary, but it's one of my favorite things to show architecture history students because it shows residents of a specific building talking about their experiences of living, which is something that you often is completely absent or was completely absent in many of the architecture histories that I grew up learning about. And so I think
architects don't even like photographs of
with
their
people in
buildings
them.
with people in them.
Right. And so I feel like it's not actually the pedagogy we're talking about in a way is not architectural pedagogy in a sense. It's design build, which is adjacent and connected, but it's a craft of attending to communities, place and building rather than, as you say, architecture with a capital A, which I think is important to note.
Well, and I think it also, in light of us talking about sort of the way pedagogies land and different sites and change over time and things like this, I also appreciated how you kind of periodized actually, this practice, that it's changed over time. This isn't a sort of static thing. And perhaps it began, I think, rooted within one lineage of design built in a more material sense. And of course, that's a huge part of the legacy of the school. But then actually doing, I think you said 2007 to 2014 or something, was more or less like user study and kind of vernacular study, both how were people living in your context, but also going out and, precedent study is a kind of constantly vexed idea too. Like, how do we learn from our environments? What do we give students to learn from? What do we teach them is worthy of study, right? As well as, I just have to call out the structural and sort of financing implications of if you tried to teach the history of mortgage lending to 18-year-olds, it is not an easy process, right? Like, this is not a moment.
Mackenzie knows it inside.
If you've been in that classroom and you're like trying to talk about like a HELOC versus, and they're like, I don't know anything about this, right? But like the context and the gravity of saying like, oh, we're going to be able to actually take the sweat equity out of your mortgage payment. I think I wrote like 5 exclamation points next to my note, right? So of course that's meaningful for that, for those people, those recipients, but also for those students as practitioners to have a sense of that as also a continuation of what your practice is.
I wonder, Chris, do we have time for 1 or 2 questions if there are folks in the audience who have them? And if it's gotten to the point in the day where everyone's feeling like, actually, I'd rather have that conversation all together, then we can also break. But if there's a moment, especially with a question for Andrew, please go for it. And if not, people might be like, I'm ready for the beverage portion of the afternoon, which is also totally fine because it's a Saturday.
Yeah.
I don't see anyone with a burning question. You're always taught to wait good 15 seconds just in case. But maybe it's worth us
making space. You make space.
Chris, handing back to you to say thank you so much.
In that case, I think we'll call it a day. Thanks
Wonderful.
to all of you.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for being here today.
Thank you.